Ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the Public Policy and Finance Committee to order, and we're going to have you up first, Mr. Chairman. Representative Watson.
Which one would you like for me to do first? HR 686. You should have a new sub before you. LC 43 2292S. For those of you who may have missed, this is dealing with a constitutional amendment with the ad valorem on timber when it's actually harvested and sold. The previous version included a reimbursement similar to Fifa that many of you are familiar with, but we were actually including the entire ad valorem base. We've since corrected that in the sub to include only on line 31 and 33. You'll see that it says total timber harvest ad valorem tax revenue. That was some of the confusion in the bill, but we've got that clarified now. So that limits it. When landowners harvest the timber, they will be taxed. And if this passes on 40% of value, which makes it equal to all other ad valorem taxes across the state. It's part of what this bill is doing, is just providing equity in what we're doing. The local governments will be reimbursed the 60% of that to help keep them whole, very similar to the Fifa program that's already in place. And once again, the timber industry and the landowners most of the time are told what they're going to be paid for the products that they grow and produce. They don't get to decide what they're going to get paid for these products. And that's part of the reason for bringing this bill forward. And I know the forestry folks are here. Andreas, if you have any further questions, and just appreciate the committee's support.
There we go. Okay. Any members of the committee got questions? Yes, sir. I recognize you, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I commend the author on the bill and working with this, and I'm sure that Andres might have a few things to say about it when we take testimony, but I do want to ask Andres one question. What's the proper pronunciation of the acronym FIFA?
That's a great question. So Federación Internacional de Fútbol Asociaciones. And so that would be, yeah.
Can you give
exactly, that's right. So that's the Spanish version, but it's really French based. And then in English, it's the International Federation of Football Associations.
I get it. I appreciate it. I've just had that. We were Representative Wiedauer and Casey Carpenter as well. I think we're struggling with that. I knew that you probably could help out, but
I learned that from watching Ted Lasso.
Other members? Really? Okay. If we're in a posture, this is the second hearing. Is there something we got to move to pass? We have a second. All those in favor of moving the bill to the full committee will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, you are in the full committee with the HR. And while you're there, we'll go ahead and move on to which one?
Again, this is another bill on behalf of our forestry industry. Currently, equipment is taxed on ad valorem. We're still unsure how much of this equipment is taxed and accounted for across the state. Obviously, it stays in the woods all the time, so nobody really sees it or knows that it's there. But once again, it's somewhat about some equity. The agricultural industry is not taxed on any of their equipment. And so we're trying to do the same for the forestry equipment as well. This equipment depreciates fast. So even if it is accounted for, the value decreases fast because of the use of the equipment. So we don't feel like there'll be a huge impact on our local governments. But that's basically what the bill is doing, is just providing them with an exemption on their equipment. I'd be glad to take any questions.
I have to ask this. So you said the agriculture industry does not pay ad valorem taxes on the business personal property, correct?
On the equipment.
Well, that's the business personal property, the
Yes.
equipment, not the real estate, but your equipment. So then a further question, what's the, is it not true that Georgia's number one industry is agriculture?
It is.
And what's the number one agricultural crop in terms of revenue in Georgia?
Well, forestry is the number one Georgia is the number one forestry state in the nation.
But is that not agriculture?
It is.
So so it sounds like we're fixing a,
You're right. And when I found out about all of this, I wondered where and when all this happened and why they were not included at the same time agriculture was, because it is an agricultural crop and it's grown and produced in our state just like any other crop. But they've been paying ad valorem all these years on the trees, on their crop that they harvest, and on the equipment that they use to harvest that crop.
thank you.
Actually, isn't it true that minus forestry, tourism is number one industry? So that's how large it is. Members. Yes, sir.
If I may, just so I understand really, but it says that all timber equipment means all equipment other than motor vehicles. But then down in line 65, equipment used in harvesting shall include all off-road equipment. So does that off-road equipment include any motor vehicles, or is that, I mean, I think of an off-road equipment could be either way. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
If it includes,
Chairman Williamson has a,
I'm not on motor vehicles, but I believe it would if it doesn't require a tag. It doesn't, you know, if it's a piece of equipment that's permanently used off roads, and just then it might look like an automobile, but I don't
But
believe
not
it would have
tagged.
to have a
Okay.
tag
Okay.
associated with it. I believe I'm correct on this. The CPA and all.
I'm sure you're correct. I'm just curious about that.
makes sense. Other members of committee? We are in a position for a motion, if there is one, on House Bill 997 LC 432167. We have a move. We have a second. All those in favor of the move of House Bill 997, say aye. All those opposed. And the bill passes on to full committee. Thank you,
all
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
We're going to move on to House Bill 1224 LC 345790.
Okay, present from here, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of the subcommittee, what I have this afternoon is a simple, we always say that, right? Simple proposition, but there exists opportunities when you appeal ad valorem taxes. You appeal to the Board of Equalization. You can appeal to the hearing officer, various places when you appeal. And you know, if you go to the Board of Equalization, you go with a right to appeal to Superior Court, et cetera. In current law, there's an opportunity to appeal directly to a hearing officer in certain cases. And what we seek to do with this legislation is allow a taxpayer that is appealing the valuation of tangible personal property, not real property, but tangible personal property in excess of $200,000, to go directly to a hearing officer with a right to appeal to Superior Court. And the reason for that is typically a board of equalization on residential property is some of your neighbors. You know, it's three citizens in a county, and they know about you know what the real property is. Many cases with the complexity involved in ascertaining the fair market value of this personal property in complicated manufacturing environments, the appeal from the Board of Equalizations is just an automatic appeal. They quite frankly, many times the citizens just, you know, take the word of the county and don't get deep down into the facts. That's just not their sweet spot. They're citizens like you and I are, and it typically goes straight to the Board of Appeals. So what this legislation seeks to do, and it's in three places because it's the three parts of the code where you are able to pick that on the form and appeal to there, and then it has to let the hearing officer have the ability to hear it, and then the last portion is where it addresses where the appeal would go if the hearing officer doesn't, if the outcome could be appealed by the county or by the taxpayer. So what we're really trying to do here is get these more complicated tangible personal property issues to a hearing officer that is more skilled at making a fair determination of the value. It doesn't do anything about changing the information that goes in to set that. So it doesn't say you weight this more or less. It changes nothing about that. I've touched base with the Department of Revenue, and I'd love to hear if Revenue's here or if any of our taxing authorities, you know, have questions about it. But the idea is just to make the process more streamlined and get the appeal in front of someone that is more set to make the decision.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's a hearing only, so let's, members got questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Audience?
Again, I wanted to have that hearing because it's been out there for a few weeks here, and just if there's anyone that has a question, you know, from the taxing authorities or for the Department of Revenue, I'd love to know what that is so we can work through it.
I don't have a question. Chairman Martin, I want to commend you for bringing this bill. I think it's a great bill that will benefit our taxpayers very well, with the idea of somebody with expertise hearing the appeal instead of folks, with all due respect to them, who know little about what they're listening to, truthfully. I think this is an excellent bill.
With that, and again, it's a thankless job to sit on a board of equalization. I would go on record to say that our citizens in our counties that sit and listen to that. The other thing is these tend to take a while to be presented, and in many counties, especially my county, Fulton, oftentimes personal individuals that are appealing their home values are way delayed, and sometimes a whole year. So removing this should allow. It should ungum the works there, if you will, and move it on to a hearing officer. Thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak to the bill? Wow, okay. Then being a hearing only, first hearing, then we will move on to the next bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. House Bill 1280. That's going to be LC 432998S. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Stevens. And I do want to say this is the LC version of the bill that is a substitute. It is almost exactly like the one that was dropped, with the removal of one small alternate provision regarding the proposed cap. So what HB 1280 does is, well, it regards the provisions governing how county tax commissioners contract with municipalities to collect and assess municipal taxes. Currently, if you don't know, there's a three-tiered system for how this is done, depending on how many tax parcels there are in a county. And as of last year, because of a problem that happened in Gwinnett County, where I'm from, whether a county might have 14 or more municipalities. So this bill replaces that three-tiered system with a universally consistent system That is, in every case, the county tax commissioner, and the municipality must sit down and come up with the contract regarding assessment, and that contract would be applicable to the county tax commissioner's current term plus 1 year. And this provision would ensure that every entity has a seat at the table. Currently, given the 3-tiered system, it depends on what tier you are, who gets to sit at that table. And what HB 1280 does is also forces those entities to specify the amounts to be paid out. That's a further measure at contracting transparency. In addition to that, this bill sets an actual cap in the payments that can be made to the county tax commissioner for this assessment. A cap does not currently exist, statutorily speaking. That cap, as 1280 states, is at 50% of the minimum annual salary for the county tax commissioner as statutorily defined. Very thankful to Chairman Abstration, who's here, who has really led on this issue. And I'm thankful as well to GATO, the Georgia Association of Tax Officials, GMA, and ACCG for coming together and agreeing on this version of the bill. And that is HB 1280 in a nutshell.
Oh, I can think of a county or two that might want to come testify. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill. Just for clarification, I've not studied it as much. The 50% cap, is that the total for all municipalities there might be, or can each of the municipalities be 50% of their previous salary? And
That's correct.
which one is it?
To clarify, it is 50% for the county tax commissioner, regardless of how many municipalities there is.
Thank you.
Got it. Other questions, members? Yes, ma'am.
What are they currently getting? How did this change? I can't see where you changed in statute. How much are the tax commissioners currently getting?
That is not statutorily defined currently. It's as the current code is written, it really depends on what either the county tax commissioner and the municipality, what they can agree with depending on what tier they're in. But there is no specific cap to how much they can be paid for this, what's called additional responsibilities for collecting these assessments.
Well, I think I remember, there was a tax commissioner that was getting a really exorbitant salary. Would this have anything to do with making it reasonable?
Yes, that is correct. There have been more than one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you got
I'm sorry, one follow-up question on line 22 where it says it's a 3-party contract negotiated. I'm just curious if one of the 3-party, there is no contract, there is no collection, nothing happens unless all 3 are party to a contract specifying this, going by these. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, sounds good.
So how in that 3-party contract is the city not held hostage?
The way, for example, under one of the current tiers of the system, the first tier, and you can find it kind of crossed out, or it is crossed out rather, under lines 49 through 61. That's saying that the tax commissioner, if you are in a county with fewer than 50,000 tax parcels, the tax commissioner is authorized to contract for and to accept, receive, and retain compensation from the municipality for those additional duties. So even under existing law, for those municipalities that might have the least ability to assess their own taxes, they themselves do not have the same bargaining power as would exist under 1280. As the law is currently written, it's really up to the tax commissioner. They're the one that's authorized to contract for that. As 1280 is written, regardless of how many tax parcels you're in, because the municipality always has a seat at the table, and because there is at least a cap, again, there is not a cap currently, that would give the municipality much more bargaining power than they currently have, at least in many places.
Any follow-up? Okay. Other members of committee? Chairman Administration, would you like to take the end down here?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. I've been working on this issue since last year. Y'all might recall the weekend before sine die of the 21 session, there was media report as to an issue in Gwinnett County where the newly elected tax commissioner had told the cities that she was going to exercise her ability under existing Georgia law at the time to effectively double her salary. And the implications of that were going to have very significant, it's going to cause a tax increase to cities that were utilizing the county for their tax collection. So since that time, we started working on a bill, and I'm proud to report that House Bill 1280 that's presented to you today is an agreement reached between the Georgia Tax Commissioners Association, GMA, and ACCG. Everybody supports this draft, and that has taken a considerable amount of time to reach that agreement. Just a couple quick points. The three-party contract that was referenced, that was something that we worked on initially. We considered whether an agreement was to be reached between the cities and the tax commissioner that's then ratified by the commissioners, which may cause the same issue Chairman Martin was talking about. Ultimately, we decided the three-party contract was the most appropriate framework because existing law with the fix that we passed last year really cuts the tax commissioner out of that process. Currently, it's really just between the cities and the counties reaching that agreement, and then the tax commissioner has to do whatever the commission agrees to. So we think this is a much more reasonable framework, and it gives everyone input, and it allows there to be consistency statewide.
Thank you, Chairman Estration. Help me understand though, if you have a tax commissioner that's not very cooperative, does that stop the ability for the municipality to use to have them collect taxes for them?
Yeah, that's right. The tax commissioner takes on certain responsibilities in collecting the municipalities, and maybe it's not a good system to have a disgruntled tax commissioner who doesn't want to be doing the job, who's constitutionally elected himself or herself, forced to do it. That may cause more problems or potential liability that wouldn't be a good thing. It's important that if this is going to take place, everybody be on board as part of it, and that nobody be using the system for their undue benefit. And we think this framework prevents that.
And then absent the ability for them to utilize a contractual relationship with the tax commissioner to collect those taxes, then the municipality will be responsible for collecting their own taxes, mailing out bills and collecting their own.
That's right. I will also mention, this just jogged my memory about something. There's also inconsistency in existing law about the collection of taxes and fees, and this clears that up as well. So it's all treated uniformly. No inconsistency there.
Including garbage fees.
Yeah, garbage, street lights, and any other fees that might be in place. Yeah.
Other members? Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman Parsons.
Chairman Administration. So I see in here where the agreement is only good for the term of the current tax commissioner. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, it's the term of the current term that he or she's currently serving plus 1 year. And the reason we did that is we want to have a transition year for any new agreements that may need to be reached on a new term. Now, any existing contracts that are currently in place at the time this bill passed will continue to be in place through their existing term. That's section 2 of the bill. And so it would only be when that contract is then renewed or renegotiated that House Bill 1280 would apply.
Okay, thank you.
Other members? Okay, let's go to the public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody want to speak for or against the bill? Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. My name's Kevin Payne. I'm the tax commissioner in Floyd County, and I'm actually the legislative chair for the Georgia Association of Tax Officials. And we are here in support of this bill. Very thankful for Representative Lim and Representative Estration for a lot of hard work on this. We've been working on it since like I said, last year. There's a lot of compromise in this bill. It took a lot of work to get all the parties in agreement here, but we think this is a great a great compromise to move forward. We, the tax commissioners understand that it has been a problem, that there has been no cap. I think I would tell you that the issue of tax commissioners collecting for cities and sometimes having excessive salaries because of that is probably an issue in about 5 to 6 counties. I would tell you 150 out of 159 counties, this issue never comes up. But it is an issue sometimes in certain counties, and this bill will take care of that. And like I said, GATO, our association is supporting it, and be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Members of the committee. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I saw some head shaking in the back, either GMA or ACCG, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Bowersox, Georgia Municipal Association, and I'll just kind of quickly echo some of the comments we've heard. We do really appreciate Representative Lim, Chairman Administration, Kevin, all of us, and ACCG coming to the table and agreeing on this. We do see this as an improvement in law. It helps put in one system statewide, helps set the parameters and restrictions on these contracts, and provides cities some predictability as they enter and do negotiations with the tax commissioner and the county on these situations. I think that's one of the biggest things, that we're not attempting to rewrite many of these contracts out there, but just provide some of the guardrails on them going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I appreciate y'all hearing this bill today.
Members. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Kumbaya.
Don't want to feel left out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Clint Mueller with ACCG. We also support this legislation. Just one other thing to add, just so you all are aware, one of the problems we were having with the current law is counties under 50,000 parcels. There's 2 separate contracts, one with the Board of Commissioners and the City Council, another one between the City Council and the Tax Commissioner. And quite frankly, there was, like it's already been said here today, no cap on compensation, but also that was not running through the county's finance system. And so some people were not taking out taxes on that extra money, and that was getting some people in trouble. This bill corrects that. This money will all flow through the county's normal finance system, and they will payroll, and they will get the taxes taken out, and they'll get this as part of their other compensation. So I think it's, again, much more transparent than the current system. We don't have these side deals that nobody knows about. It's all in one contract where everybody can see what the rules are. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for the good want to speak? This being the first hearing, in a sense, it's already technically gone through hearings before and worked on extensively. Something tells me that since it is a hearing, that it'll come out in a New York minute in our next one. So Representative Lim, I appreciate you bringing the bill and fixing a problem that's been around for a bunch of years. So this is a good bill. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you to the committee.
Just for the record, I'm wearing my
I did.
If that were the case, it would have been cut. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have today for this particular committee. We are adjourned. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman had to step out for another meeting, but we're going to move on to sales tax in just a moment. For those of you that would like to speak, please sign up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call the Sales Tax Subcommittee of Ways and Means to order. I suppose I'm driving since the chairman went to another committee. So we're going to pull up first the substitute to House Bill 1278. Is that right? And you can 1278. And Representative Bentley, let's see. LC 432291S, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I present to you, as the chairman just mentioned, the substitute to House Bill 1278, which is relating to the Civil and Human Rights Museum here in Atlanta. I don't know if any of you had a chance to visit, but if you haven't, I encourage you please to do so. It's a beautiful facility with a lot of rich history. And what this bill is basically asking is for the exemption that was already in place to be reinstated. I apologize. That's the funeral home line. I'm sorry.
It's a deadline. Go ahead. I couldn't help myself.
Thank you.
Please, go
Thank
ahead.
you. So basically what I'm asking for, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, with House Bill 1278, this bill will reinstate the sales tax exemption on construction materials used in renovation or redesign of civil rights museums. And basically, again, this will be a reinstatement to the exemption that expired back in 2015. And just some points to be aware of, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights will invest over $30 million into this expansion. And as I stated, the facility is a very beautiful facility. It was built back in 2014. And this bill will reinstate the sales tax exemptions on construction materials. And the expansion will include classrooms, conference and event space, a family gathering space of 900 square feet, a cafe and a gallery to house different artifacts and collections of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we have officials here from the National Center of Civil and Human Rights that can testify more about how this exemption will help with their plans to expand the facility. And the substitute also provides language that will include not just this Civil Rights Museum here in Atlanta, but all civil rights museums across the state of Georgia. Okay. So I will pause at this time to try to answer any questions that if there may be any. But I would love to invite, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we have representatives from the center that can also share a little bit more details about the Pacific project.
Sure. First, questions from committee. Okay. There we go.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the bill. I was just a clarification that you mentioned during the construction and potentially $30 million. Does that include, like, say, the purchase of artifacts or special historical significance? Would that include items to be displayed in the museum or just the construction? And I'm not
Just
sure.
from my understanding, just the construction.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because, okay, thank you. Just a clarification.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. And again, it's just to reinstate what was already in place some years back, but it expired back in 2015. So this would just reinstate that sales tax that was in place few years back.
Yes, sir.
So explain to me, if there's one that was in place already, when did that go in place and when did it expire?
Well, the center was built back in 2014 and that exemption expired July.
But that was for the building of it. That related to materials for the building of it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding,
And
yes.
this one is for the renovation.
The renovations. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's all.
Just reinstating what was already in place that ended in 2015.
Okay.
Anyone else? Don Bird, would you like to, why don't you come to this one so that the presenter can stay at her seat.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The sales tax exemption will allow us to do an expansion of the building and some renovations of our existing exhibits. When the building was initially built in 2014, it was supposed to be much bigger, and it was designed to be expanded on two sides. So we're going to build two wings. In one wing, it'll be 3 stories, and there will be a family gallery, retail cafe, a gallery for new artifacts, and a temporary gallery. On the other side, there'll be classrooms and event spaces so we can expand our ability to attract different types of events at one time. Right now, we have one event space where we have to share it between public events for our public and for private events where people want to rent it out. So we'd love to have more events for the public and for the community, and this will allow us to do that. This expansion will allow us to increase our visitorship, which will increase economic development in the city of Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. It also already we've had visitors from over 66 counties in Georgia, and we'd like to extend that to all counties in Georgia. But this expansion would be big for us when FIFA and other things come to town. We're a big part of what that economic development is. So we're down there with the World of Coca-Cola, Georgia Aquarium, College Football Hall of Fame. And really, one reason we're building the family gallery is all those things are geared towards kids. And we don't have anything for really under 6 years old. So this will allow us to attract families and have them come see not only things for smaller kids, but for all age ranges.
Thank you. Members?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add, a very important piece to this conversation is economic development. As Mr. Byrd stated, this expansion will contribute a lot to this tax base of Atlanta, as well as this for the state of Georgia. As he mentioned, over 66 counties have visitors visiting the Civil and Human Rights Museum, and this expansion will open it up to more counties across the state. So again, I invite all of you to visit the facility if you have not had a chance to do so.
And it will expire on August of 2025, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Sunset. Anyone else? Thank you, Representative Bentley. Thank you, Don, for coming up and presenting. Thank you for the museum. It is a true proud moment and a proud facility for all of Georgians to go experience. So today is a first hearing. If there are no more questions, I'll give it to the other chairman so we can move on. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Phone. Which one? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing the meeting, and thanks to Chairman Stevens for standing in. We get to this point and have to be in multiple places. We have the next item on our agenda, House Bill 1291 LC 43 2252. The Vice Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Representative Vance Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Members of the committee. 1291, this is important to small business here in Georgia that grow into big business. And it's a high-tech exemption. Right now, the exemption amount is 15 million, and we're looking to raise that to 18. And we're also looking to extend the sunset. Right now, the sunset's June 30th, 2023. And we're asking for December 31st, 2033. So, and both of those are negotiable. But just to give you an example, some of the companies that have started here in Georgia and have grown into some global companies, Home Depot is one, and Global Payments is another company, and that's in my part of the state. So we think it's definitely economic development, but it's great to help these small homegrown companies turn into global companies throughout the world. A lot of people support this, Georgia Chamber, Atlanta Chamber,
Georgia Manufacturing and the Georgia Agribusiness Council are all supportive of this too. So those are the two main goals: extend the sunset and raise that threshold from 15 million to 18 million, and be happy to try to answer any questions. I do have Miss Leanna Brown and Mr. Marshall Guest here from Metro Chamber. If there's some questions that we need to direct to them, they're more than willing to try to answer those.
A little trouble with my screen up here. Thank you very much for the presentation. Let me first ask the subcommittee, do you have any questions in regards to this item? Any question in regards to this proposition? Yes, sir. What number are you? Got you.
I'm looking through here. But the only thing I see, I may be wrong here, but the only thing I see where it identifies the type of equipment is in line 19. Goes on down there. Any person making a sale or lease. That's, well, okay, of computer equipment. That's already in code though, right? You're just changing the, you're just making a couple of changes with this, right? I mean, as far as the amount and extending it out, is that what you're doing? Is this just an extension of the sunset? Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're asking to extend the sunset
Right
to 2033 and to raise that threshold from 15 million to 18 million.
I see that now, exactly what you said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can ask me.
Yeah, Chairman Parsons, if you would remember, this has actually, I think, been on the books. Paragraph 68A, 68 has been on the books since 1999. It was sunset last year in Senate Bill 6, and a tweak was made to the language at that point in Senate Bill 6 that narrowed it based on some ongoing litigation. I believe you leave that tweak in place. So this is a sunset. This is a revision of the sunset of 68 as exists in current law, not as existed pre-2021.
As I currently understand it, that's the way
we're
it
not
is.
changing that back, but
Right.
that's what this does. Yes, sir, Dr. Newton.
This is a hearing only today, correct? I was just curious, just for information purposes, and somebody may know, it looks like it's 140 million a year, goes up to maybe 160 at the end of the 5-year extension, or I assume it's running close to that 140 million a year number right now. Is it, you mentioned the global companies and all, is it possible to get a list of the top 5 or 10 that are availing themselves of this? Yeah,
I would, it's revenue. Anybody want to wave their hand? I think, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I mean, we have Ms. Wanacre on Zoom, so I don't know. So we'll go to Ms. Wanacre. Ms. Wanacre, if you can hear us, the question was, can we get the top 5 or 6 companies that avail themselves of this? I believe we're limited in getting serial information by specific company. What level of granularity could you provide the subcommittee, if anything lower than all of those that do number 6, that apply for number 68? Can you help us with that information?
Mr. Chairman, certainly I can tell you that we couldn't provide the names of any companies who are availing themselves to this exemption, and that's confidential taxpayer information, and we can't disclose that. There was a reporting requirement for the dollars exempted that was also part of Senate Bill 6 in 2021, where companies that are availing themselves to the exemption need to report to the Department of Revenue the amount exempted in the prior calendar year. Those reports, those first reports aren't due though until March 31st, 2022. So we actually haven't received very many at this juncture.
Okay, fair enough. So we can't, as a matter of tax policy or statutes related to the Revenue Department and taxation, we don't get individualized taxpayer information because that's private between the taxpayer and on a need to know basis with the Revenue Department, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah, so even aggregating to the top 4 or 5, that would actually somewhat identify their personalized tax or their individual tax information. Okay, thank you very much. Representative Smith.
And thanks, Brian, for getting the fiscal note. We actually literally just got the fiscal note today. And, you know, we agree with everything they say. I know someone we would like to look at that just in case there was an explanation or we needed to make an explanation to make sure those numbers are just right. But we're not doubting that, but we just want to have time to look at it because we hadn't really looked at it until today when we got it. So.
Fair enough. What number are you over there? Number 2 or 1?
Number 1. Isn't
Yes,
this
ma'am.
just part of buying this equipment, just part of doing business?
Um,
I guess you could say that.
What about the small businesses that have computers? Do they get it?
I don't disagree with you.
Because this
Representative.
country's running on small businesses, you know, a lot.
And a lot of them started as small business, I would say.
All right.
So it's anybody that has a high tech, even the funeral homes.
Well, if they spend 18 million, yeah.
Right.
Patty, I heard was going to apply, but.
All right, we're going to ask, chair's going to rule that one as asked and answered. I've always wanted to do that. I've heard judges do that on TV. So the question was asked, question was answered. What else, Madam Chair?
That's a great idea, though.
Any other questions from the author? I mean, I would say this as chair, this is a policy decision. I mean, it was in place in 1999. There's a reason it went in place in 1999. It was sunset last year, I think for June of 2023. This subcommittee in the House was good enough to extend that to December, if the subcommittee will recall, because this is a calendar year exemption. And we were cutting it off in the middle of a calendar year. This is the one that we did. We did get it. I would loosely say out of the ditch because we moved it from June 30th to December 31st.
We just did that, didn't we?
We just did that. Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is the same thing?
Well, yes, ma'am. Each and every member can bring the bills of their choice, and that's what we're here. That's what we're hearing today. Yes,
No,
ma'am.
I thought we just passed one that's in the House.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. We did to move it to December 31st, 2023. The gentleman brings the proposition to raise the level and to extend it further. And that's what we'll discuss at the appropriate time. We're going to hear some more testimony though, right here in a minute. Okay. Number 10, Dr. Newby.
You may have just answered it. We're going to hear more testimony. I'm just curious, if we're aiming for small business, it doesn't sound like small businesses spend a lease of 18 million a year or purchase 18 million a year. I would wonder, why would we go up from 15 to 18? First off, what was wrong with 15? Why not lower it to 10 or 5? I'm not sure if I understand the goal.
And lady has the right to introduce that piece of legislation if she sees fit.
The reason to raise it $3 million, what was there?
Perhaps
Okay.
we'll get some testimony
Thank
to
you.
that if the committee. Further questions of the author of the bill? Vice Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Representative Smith, thank you for doing that. So no good deed goes unpunished, sir. Leanna Brown, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Which do you choose? You both may go. I just saw one name on here, Mr. Pest, but just identify your.
We're package deals sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. You have the floor. Just obviously identify both of you if you would, and you're with the Metro Chamber, but tell us that again.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leanna Brown with the Metro Atlanta Chamber and
Marshall Guest with the Metro Atlanta Chamber.
So thank you for allowing us a moment to speak in support of House Bill 1291. As many of you know, the Metro Atlanta Chamber is primarily an economic development organization. We support projects both in the Metro Atlanta region and at times across the state. Most of Georgia's massive technology investment across multiple business sectors has been accomplished since this incentive was established. And our economic development team really hears firsthand, again, across the state about the importance of this incentive. We have investors who actively use the incentive, and they represent a variety of industries, including shipping and logistics, payment processing, manufacturing, and communications. As was stated before, it's supported by a variety of organizations, not just the Metro Atlanta Chamber, also our partners at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Manufacturing Association, and the Georgia Agribusiness Council. And also the Georgia Department of Economic Development actively promotes this incentive in their 2022 Business Incentives Toolkit. So thanks to the work of this committee, Georgia is a very competitive state when it comes to attracting investment, and this bill will help us keep that edge. It's really a standard incentive used in a lot of states, and without it, Georgia will lose. We'll be at a competitive disadvantage. It will allow us to attract new investment, but it's also about retaining some of our existing investment. Vice Chair Smith mentioned some of those companies that we've really been able to grow from the ground up here in Georgia, starting as small businesses. The reason that there's such broad support for incentives like this is because it's used by all sorts of companies every company almost these days relies on large amounts of technology. And so we heard companies like Global Payments, the Home Depot, and UPS. Those are not big tech companies, but they are large companies who rely on technology to do their business. I want to thank the committee and Chairman Martin for passing House Bill 1223, which extends the sunset by 6 months. By now, most agree that mid-calendar year sunset on a full calendar year tax exemption was impractical. And so the business community is grateful for those efforts. Let's see here. So that said, still a very short window, which doesn't give companies a lot of time to plan significant multi-year capital investments. Companies looking to make long-term investments are looking for long-term certainty, which is why we favor pushing this incentive to 2033. We also recognize that the incentive has been in place for quite a while, so we acknowledge that the threshold can be revisited. And Chairman Newton, that was the reason in conversations that we've had prior to session, that was the reason for proposing a raise in the threshold. But I think you bring up an excellent point that the higher it is raised, more companies, perhaps smaller companies, are no longer able, it's cost prohibitive for them to use it. So we believe that allowing the incentive to expire will hurt our state's pro-business environment. And we ask for your favorable consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Did you have anything you want to add, Mr. Guest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my colleague here summed it up quite nicely. Leave it to her.
Thank you. Questions let me first ask, would you take questions if there are some?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Are there questions? I have a couple. We've talked about this as you know. Well, I'll yield number 3. Who's got a question? I'll hold mine. Yes, sir. Chairman Parsons. I'll wait.
Well, I'm not opposed to this. I mean, I might have a sales tax exemption myself that I would want to talk about, but I am interested in this because, I mean, in the sense that, you talked about economic development and attracting these companies here and staying. But I mean, it just seems like reading through this, looking back in 1999, I think the chairman said it was first enacted. I mean, it seemed like a lot of these things would be investments that a large company would make when they first established, but not purchasing these same things year after year. I mean, that's just a kind of a question or a thought in my mind. So what about that? I mean, it just seems like, and you said and I think you had mentioned, some of these small businesses growing, but I mean, this doesn't really relate, like the gentleman said, it doesn't really relate to small business. It relates to large. So these would have to be businesses that have come here large if they got it to begin with, and have become large if they're continuing to get it. But it just seems like I've looked down at the definition of the equipment. It just seems like these would be things that, yes, initially they would have to purchase, maybe depending on what business they're in, but not things that they would purchase year after year. Do you have any sense of what? I guess I could look at the, the fiscal note and everything, but how much is this costing us a year? I mean, not really. That's not really the question. What is? I mean, so are these companies purchasing this same equipment year after year? I mean, I guess that's my question.
I don't know that they're purchasing it year after year, but I don't know for a fact that every company that we're citing or every company that uses the incentive every year, but they're unlikely to continue to make an investment in Georgia, open a new facility, for example, if they do not have the incentive to use down the road. And the way that computer technology and computer equipment changes so rapidly, they are overhauling their computer equipment, their mainframes, their servers, and that sort of thing. If you think about a shipping company and the amount of equipment computer equipment that they use to track their packages and map routes for package delivery. That's just one example. That's a lot of equipment that they're having to replace fairly often just to keep up. And it changes quickly, the technology, and it wears out fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I would just add, Chairman Parsons, I mean, of course, with this exemption, you only get the exemption when you hit that threshold number on an annual basis. So if you don't spend up to that amount, or you don't refresh in a given year, the exemption doesn't apply.
Or 18 million. I mean, I don't know how much of that equipment you get for that, but I'm just curious. I mean, just trying to put it in perspective is all. I don't do what you want to do.
So if I can't do, I don't know if there's anybody with the, the companies that use this again, to do this, but I'd like to reel the clock back to 1999 and pretend I would like to think about what folks might've been thinking about when they put this in place. Because as Dr. Newton said, you had to get to 15 million. So it wasn't that the policy at Georgia when this was passed was not to take the sales tax off a laptop to refresh that was going across, thing, unless you were doing hundreds of them, was when data centers was going. And so I would simply ask this, the exemption list at $50 million, but when you get to 15, you retroactively get the tax benefit for every dollar up to $15 million. It's not, you get everything over 15. So there was a reason at that time. I'd like for you to, the question I'm asking you is, this is a hearing only today, to do some research and get back with me so I can share with the committee. But to do the research on it, it would seem the policy at that time was to encourage people to get into the technology business. I mean, let's reel back if we can to 1999 and think about, we all weren't carrying these around. I mean, 1999, 23 years ago, we weren't carrying these around. These didn't exist. We were trying to encourage people to build data centers. What we've done is now we've shifted the capital spend. For instance, I would wonder on the NAIC, those codes on there, NAICS codes, I would like to know, what the capital spend of one of the companies you mentioned is on those codes in 2022 relative to what the capital spend as a percentage was in 1999. In other words, I think they're getting a sales tax exemption today on a far larger portion of their CapEx than they were in 1999 because technology has grown. And it seems fair if we want to incentivize, new technology is one thing, but incentivizing someone to put iPads on desks. I mean, you're going to do that wherever you are, whether you get tax. I mean, let's just be honest. You're going to do that whether you get a tax exemption or not. You might not put in a new supercomputer at your location. So I would like to, as we look at this, get some feedback from that, going to Dr. Newton's point, what can we incentivize and help smaller companies get into the technology business and be more efficient, maybe at a lower threshold if you had a lower revenue, and maybe even look at, you don't get back to the first dollar for day in, day out technological purchase, but you do when you drop the high-tech data center in. So maybe look at the codes and things, as we go forward, because that's the way I'm prefacing this to ask you the question. Wouldn't you agree business is done different in 2022 than it was done in 1999? And therefore, for us to incentivize business, it's possible that the guts in this needs to change in order to, incentivize. I mean, incentives try to create a behavior, and the behaviors that we're trying to create is not putting a computer on everybody's desk, because everybody's going to do that. The incentive is to, bring to the next level. So maybe some of the things you were saying, maybe the technology that you put in your truck to deliver packages so you don't cause traffic jams, so we don't have to build more roads and those things. But can you help us get some of that information from your clients?
Absolutely.
Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, Representative Bentley, did you have something that you wanted to add? I thought I saw you. Are you on witness microphone number 2?
Number 2,
Yes, ma'am.
I just mostly just going to make a comment, and I didn't, want to, please excuse me, it's not my intent to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but kind of back to what Chairman Parson mentioned about small businesses. I see the need for this legislation for those companies that like you referenced, such as UPS, because as a funeral home owner, we rely on companies like UPS who are helping us get our merchandise from one company to our firms. So just kind of wanted to just share that piece about how this bill is helping those larger companies, but in return, it is trickling down to help very, very small businesses like a mortuary. Yeah.
And Chair, did y'all want to respond to Representative Bentley and then we'll go to,
I was just going to say, thank you for the comment, Representative Bentley. Appreciate that one. And, you know, may want to pivot back to what Chairman Newton was saying about potentially lowering the threshold so it could potentially apply to smaller businesses too. We are open to that conversation. So.
And that is exactly how indirect economic impact works. And so that's one of the benefits that we see of this incentive, exactly to your point.
Chair House.
We'd love for you to join us.
Well, one thing too, I just want y'all to remember when you're pointing out all these incentives about UPS, and one thing we have really going in our state that is the ports. And be sure that incentivizes a lot of people to come here. So that's an incentive in its own, and don't forget the ports.
That's a fantastic point, Madam Chair.
Great
Thank
point,
you.
Madam Chair.
And we don't have to, John, leave it at that. I'll stop on that. We forget the ports a lot of times that people come here because of the ports.
Yes, ma'am.
The ports are certainly an economic driver. Yes, ma'am.
Further questions for the presenters? Yes, sir. What number are you? What were you? 5. You have it.
Just to follow up on a little bit here, to make sure that we understand what the exposure is on an $18 million state exposure, we're looking at 4%, which should be about 720,000. But the same exposure is also to the locals. So they've got skin in the game.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the fiscal note in here for FY 2024 is 82 million to the state, 69 million to the locals.
So it's not just on us. is
Yeah.
my point.
This is a tax exemption for the state and the locals. Yeah. Further questions of the presenters? No, you guys have no further questions.
Thank you.
Go forth and bring back information, please. I mean, all joking aside, you can be, we count on you to be very helpful. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak to this proposition, but if there's anybody in the room that would like to, we appreciate your attendance and we'd give you that opportunity this time. Any further speakers? No further speakers at this time. Did you have anything you want to close us down with? All right, then we will call this the first hearing on this HB 1291, and we will continue to work on it. Look forward to for some additional information. Anything further before the subcommittee? There's nothing further, and without objection, we'll stand adjourned. I see no objection. We are adjourned.